For now, another piece of intellectual dishonesty. Mark Latham has been on a crusade with me, and we're almost the lone voices on the brainwashing and propaganda corrupting the minds of young people in the classroom. He has drawn my attention to a school assembly address last Friday week at the Albion Park High School down Wollongong Way by the relieving principal, one Christine Campbell. Now, don't forget, if your kids come home with this stuff, get in touch with me, alan@skynews.com.au. This woman tells the students that, quote, across the globe, but particularly in the United States and United Kingdom, people are joining in solidarity with those who've been at the hands of prejudice for over 150 years. This is telling school kids. And that in America, they quote, marching against hate. And that here in Australia, the quote, the word must be spread on what's happened to our own Indigenous population. I could never imagine the suffering they and their ancestors could have been through, but I do know I can look to history to change my own ways and take up arms, I don't know what that means, alongside those in protest. And this is something we all can do. And then a student's asked to do the acknowledgement of country, who tells the Assembly that Black Lives Matter movement is something that has been broadcasted, I think an English lesson might have been better than an assembly, over the past few weeks. And the student presumably calls upon another to talk about Indigenous deaths in custody. And talking about people taking to the streets, this student says one of the main reasons they've taken to the streets is that, quote, there have been disproportionately more deaths in custody for Indigenous people than non-Indigenous people. And what that means is that Indigenous people are far more likely to die while in custody. At one point, she said, we were 16.5 times more likely to die in custody. And then the problem is that such high numbers of Aboriginal people are arrested and jailed. And she goes on with this sort of stuff. And then these protests are helping to give Aboriginal people a voice to be able to speak about what matters to them. And then around the world, protesters are taking a knee to peacefully protest, the Black Lives Matter movement. Year 12 committee groups and the Aboriginal leadership team, she said, will now be taking a knee. And we should all strive for a world free of racism and discrimination. Mark Latham, the principal's cheering this on and then is so proud of it, sends it to the parents.
Well, Alan, you know, our schools used to be about giving young people their best start in life, neutral of ideology, neutral of politics. But now you've got a whole bunch of activists in our school system who think the school is there to indoctrinate political change. And it's a low point in New South Wales education that the students were, well, essentially forced into taking a knee to an organisation, Black Lives Matter, that's Neo-Marxist, that believes in defunding the police, that attacks the nuclear family, that believes in gender fluidity, and here in New South Wales has openly broken court and health orders. So if that's the sort of organisation that students have got to take a knee to, that's the new role model, then we're done for.
But also it's the untruths, isn't it? Indigenous people are far more likely to die in custody. Now, didn't the Royal Commission find that Indigenous people are not more likely to die in custody than other Australians?
Well, the Australian Institute of Criminology has found that over the past 15 years, Indigenous people have had a lower death rate in custody than non-Indigenous. So there's a falsehood delivered at the Assembly, and the principal, either so naive or arrogant in her politics, broadcasting the falsehood in the school newsletter. And let everyone know that they're wrong. Let everyone know they're wrong. And also the student put out the figure about 430 deaths since the Royal Commission. Now, we've had all the coronial inquiries, all the examination of these matters. The inference is always 430 have been killed by police or prison officers. The actual figure is zero.
Correct.
Zero have been murdered by those
The Royal
officers.
Commission found that far from the police violence being the primary cause of death in custody, natural causes were the leading factor for black deaths in custody. So here is a principle prospering untruths to impressionable minds.